WWE wrestlers who self-destructed their own career. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Also check out our new videos on Wrestlelamia XL. Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, a man that most considered a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent. Hennig had it all: looks, talent, and charisma. You can say that he was, well, perfect. The former Intercontinental Champion made waves during his second stint in WWE. He was an excellent heel who had classic feuds against some of the biggest stars during his era, and it seemed as if Mr. Perfect was on the cusp of becoming a world champion. But sadly, that never happened. Many stars scratched their heads on how Curt never won the WWE Championship. Some say that the company was too focused on having a babyface lead the promotion. Others claim that injuries and drug use were an issue, and none of these claims have been confirmed to be true, but personal demons would ultimately be the downfall of Hennig's WWE career. Mr. Perfect made a shocking return at the 2002 Royal Rumble after many thought he was retired following the injuries he accumulated during his second run. Hennig made a strong impression for the modern audience in his return, but he was mostly a nostalgia act in the third run. Then came the plane ride from hell. Curt became heavily intoxicated and started ribbing Brock Lesnar over who was the better amateur wrestler. He goaded the Beast to fight him to prove who the better man was. Lesnar instantly made Hennig regret that challenge, and the two had to be separated by Dave Finlay, Triple H, and Paul Heyman. Hennig was released after that incident, and the former Intercontinental Champion then wrestled in TNA for a brief period of time, but sadly, Curt Hennig passed away a year later. Cocaine intoxication was ultimately the cause of the passing, though steroids and painkillers contributed to it as well. His addiction to drugs started back in the 80s, and in fact Scott Hall told a CCW podcast that Curt was the reason he got involved with drinking himself. If you look at Curt when we first started in AEWA and how he looked by the time he was Mr. Perfect, it was because he was hanging out with me. I was teaching him about nutrition. Well, if you look at my life, I never drank or did drugs until I met Curt. I smoked a little bit of weed and I worked out. All of a sudden, anyway, it was what it was. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably live the same way. Mr. Perfect will always be a legend in a business he helped redefine, even if his personal life wasn't too perfect. Sean O'Haire. Sean O'Haire was a promising upstart during the dying days of WCW. The former WCW Tag Team Champion was more than just another big guy from Vince's wet dreams. He had talent and charisma fit for a main event star. So when O'Haire made the jump to WWE, one would think that his career would skyrocket from there. After the Alliance storyline, O'Haire seemed to be on track to get a solo push with the Devil's Advocate gimmick. It had plenty of potential. Sean O'Haire had the perfect look for the role and his vignettes were quite entertaining. His heel character was quite complex. A man telling you to feed into your most sinful urges can have plenty of mileage storyline wise, so he was disappointed that the WWE dropped the gimmick after so many vignettes. Vince paired him with Roddy Piper, but that didn't help O'Haire much. Once Piper was gone in 2003, O'Haire became a jobber. He was officially released on April 3, 2004, and on the surface it appeared that Piper's departure hampered O'Haire's career, but Chuck Palumbo gave some insight into his personal demons that held back Sean O'Haire. He was a bit on the wild side. He had some demons. I think his biggest struggle was navigating through the business. He was a pretty much straightforward guy and he had no time for the BS that goes on in the business at times. You have to be patient, you have to bite your tongue, you have to be careful whose feet you step on. It's a very touchy business. Sadly, it didn't get better for O'Haire. Though he had a short stint in New Japan Pro Wrestling and even had a match on Velocity in 2006, his wrestling career never recovered. He got into plenty of legal trouble stemming from assault, and he was allegedly dealing with substance abuse and depression. Unfortunately, he passed away on September 9, 2014. The former WWE star will always be recognized as a talented individual who could have been big in the WWE. Alberto Del Rio. Alberto Del Rio surprised everyone when he made his SmackDown debut on June 25, 2010. This was a former luchador who'd been under a mask for a good portion of his career, so he immediately caught everyone's attention with a strong gimmick that highlighted his charisma. It also helped that he was damn good in the ring. WWE pushed Alberto Del Rio strongly out of the gate, and his act was firing on all cylinders. It seemed that Vince had found his Hispanic star that he'd been looking for, but then Alberto Del Rio and Paige started dating. Now Del Rio was fired in 2014 due to slapping WWE social media manager Cody Barberi for making a racist joke. At least that's what Del Rio claims happened. Del Rio's gimmick had gotten stale by then and he was no longer the star that WWE hoped for. Still, he lit up the independent scene and had the professional wrestling world talking. This was around the time Del Rio started dating Paige, and from the jump, rumors swirled at how toxic the couple were, though there was nothing concrete to back these claims. When Del Rio returned in 2015, it was an opportunity for him to remind WWE audiences of his sheer talent. but his relationship with Paige overshadowed his return. However, it didn't help that his re-debut was lackluster. The rumors of constant fights between Del Rio and Paige were well known at this point. Even WWE tried to step in and break up the couple by threatening to fire Paige if she didn't break up with the former WWE champion. Del Rio was considered a negative presence in her life, and everyone turned on him because of how their bad relationship came across. Del Rio would leave the company in 2016, but the former WWE star was eventually blacklisted from most wrestling companies. He burned bridges with TNA Impact Wrestling due to his unprofessional behavior. His public spat with Paige in 2021 was put in a negative light, and Del Rio killed his WWE career poking fun at Triple H. While he still makes appearances here and there for AAA, his immature and unprofessional behavior is the reason no major company will ever work with him again. Teddy Hart. If you blink then miss Teddy Hart's first stint in 1998, it's a shame too, because if you watch Hart's career in Ring of Honor or Major League Wrestling, then you know how talented the third generation star is. Teddy Hart's attitude has always been the curse of his career. The guy has talent, charisma, and solid mic skills, but all the talent in the world can't excuse his bad behavior. Hart jumped ship to Ring of Honor and only lasted a year. His stint was impressive, but on November 1st, 2003, he competed in a scramble cage match. He lost, and Hart did what most rational human beings tend to do: go off script and perform obsessive moonsaults and shooting star presses off the top of the cage. Unsurprisingly, Hart was fired that night, though he did return for 2 more matches later on in Ring of Honor. He would continue to move from promotion to promotion, but his behavior problems remained the same. He got a second chance in WWE in 2005 and spent time in developmental, but Hart never made it onto the main roster. Allegedly, he didn't listen to management. Reports claim he was actually well behaved, but Teddy would go off script in his match to make sure that he got his shit in. There were rumors that WWE wanted a Hart Foundation faction with him of Davey Boy Smith and Tyson Kidd, but Teddy was too much of a liability to keep around. He continued to wrestle on the independent scene, but his legal troubles overshadowed anything he did. Charges stemmed from sexual assault, possession of cocaine, DUI, evading arrest, and strangulation and wounding bodily harm held him back even further. These days, Teddy is still in the limelight, but not in a positive one. He currently has an arrest warrant after failing to appear in court. Tammy Sunny Sytch. It feels that Sunny is known more for her legal troubles than a WWE Hall of Fame worthy career. The popular valet who took the wrestling world by storm in the 80s and 90s is certainly deserving of a Hall of Fame ring. However, not every day was sunny for Tammy Sytch. In 1998, her act was growing stale and Sable had surpassed her as the most popular woman on the roster. But Sunny wasn't fired because of her lack of appeal in the late 90s, she was fired because of her addiction to painkillers and no showing several shows. She tried her hand in ECW with Chris Candido, but their alleged drug problems cost the couple another job. The duo tried WCW, but the company was crumbling at this point, and the two just didn't click with the WCW fanbase. Sadly, Chris Candido passed away in 2005, and it only got worse for the former WWE diva. Thankfully, Sunny was able to clean up her act, and the future looked bright for the former WWE valet when she received a Hall of Fame ring in 2011. But that moment of hope was only temporary. In 2012, she was arrested 5 times in a month, and life didn't get better for Tammy as her legal troubles mounted with felonies and misdemeanors. But the DUI and domestic violence charges were nothing compared to her threatening to kill her boyfriend with a pair of scissors in 2022. However, she would manage to top that. The former WWE star drove behind the wheel impaired once again, but this time resulting in the death of an innocent 75-year-old man. After being given a slap on the wrist for over a decade, Tammy was given 17.5 years in prison. It's a tragic end to a woman who was once beloved by millions, but she did it all to herself. Chyna. Chyna will always go down as one of the most influential women to step in a professional wrestling ring. She immediately made an impact by starting out in WWE as an enforcer, but her post-DX days would showcase how dynamic she was as a performer. Who could forget her fun romance angle with her and Eddie Guerrero? Her WWE run ended due to politics. The WWE superstars no strangers to linking up, so the relationship between Chyna and Triple H wasn't a surprise. However, once became widely known that Triple H was cheating on Chyna with Stephanie McMahon, the former Intercontinental Champion wasn't the same woman who started out in the company. There are various accounts as to why WWE fired her in 2002. Jim Ross noted that Chyna had an attitude problem that stopped Vince from drawing upon a new contract. Whatever the case may be, Chyna's wrestling career never recovered once she left the company. She stated that her life spiraled out of control from that point on, with substance abuse being the main problem. But the situation only got worse when she started an adult film career. Her final match was in TNA, teaming with Kurt Angle to take on Jeff Jarrett and Karen Jarrett. The match was well received, but rumors have it that management stopped using Chyna due to her ties with adult films. Her drug issues were well known, as many noted her Howard Stern interview where she slurred her words, and being a cast member on Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. For a while, it seemed that the former WWE star was trying to get her life back in order, but she tragically passed away in December 2016 due to an overdose. WWE finally put her in the Hall of Fame with D-Generation X in 2019, and hopefully the ninth wonder of the world will also get a solo induction in the near future. Scott Hall. You'll be hard-pressed to say anything negative about Scott Hall as a performer. He made being bad so cool that kids everywhere were pushing old dudes into fountains and screaming, "You lost your mind, Chico." While Scott Hall was electrifying millions of people, he was also fighting personal demons deep down inside. There's no specific reason why Hall got into drinking or drugs, but rumors have it that it started after he killed a man in a nightclub in 1983. Hall also indicated that Mr. Hennig introduced him to the stuff when the two started hanging out together. Whatever the case may be, Hall's struggles with addiction became the crux of his career. However, unlike several names on this list, Hall was able to keep his addiction under wraps during the 80s and 90s. Given how much money Hall was making, that probably wasn't for the best. As the 2000s rolled out, his addiction became noticeable. The former Intercontinental Champion returned to WWE in 2002. It was an exciting time as the NWO brought chaos to the company, which should have resulted in huge business. But Hall's personal demons got the better of him. The plane ride from hell did him no favors as Hall reportedly became so intoxicated that he harassed two flight attendants, but that wasn't the demise for Scott. His substance abuse became worse and the WWE was forced to let him go a year later. He was then in and out of rehab throughout the years, and Stephanie McMahon even stated that they spent 7 figures trying to help him get sober. It seemed to work during his final years as the WWE used him for several appearances. So when Scott passed away on March 12, 2022, it was genuinely a shock to the entire wrestling fanbase. Now, his passing wasn't specifically related to drug abuse, but Sean Waltman did reveal that Hall did relapse during the COVID-19 lockdown. Despite his problems, Scott Hall left fans an incredible gift of being one of the most entertaining wrestlers to ever step in the ring. Marty Jannetty. Marty Jannetty has become a wrestling term these days, as whenever a tag team breaks up and one partner has fallen down the card, he's the Jannetty of the group. The crazy thing about this situation is that Jannetty was supposed to be bigger than he was treated after his fallout with Shawn Michaels. He was reportedly scheduled to fight Shawn one-on-one at Wrestlemania 8, however the former WWE Tag Team Champion's legal trouble washed those plans away. Michaels was no saint, but he was still able to perform when it was showtime. Jannetty's antics prevented him from doing so. The former WWE star got into a wild altercation with the police in '92 and he was charged with multiple offenses. This was the incident that forced the company to release him for the second time. But Vince gave Marty a third chance as he returned in October '93 to resume his feud with Shawn. The two wrestled at the Rumble for the Intercontinental Championship, with Michaels getting the victory. A backstage segment indicated that the story would continue until WrestleMania, but he was once again fired. Again, allegedly, Jannetty was under the influence during his match with Michaels. It's quite possible that him being under the influence wasn't true because Marty came back shortly after WrestleMania and beat Michaels for the Intercontinental title. He lost the belt back to HBK though a month later. That was the peak of his solo career. His stop and start pushes were mostly at the fault of his own. He never got to the level of Shawn Michaels because of personal demons. There's no telling if Jannetty would have been the next great babyface of the 80s and 90s if his personal problems didn't interfere with his career, but you can't deny that the company tried to make sure he didn't become the joke many see him today. Ryback. Career self-destruction isn't always about crashing out on drugs and alcohol. Ego can also be the biggest downfall of a man's career. Ryback certainly isn't the first man to self-destruct because of ego, because he's the only one who's effectively blackballed himself out of the business altogether. Despite a rocky start as Skip Sheffield, Ryback became one of the most over wrestlers in 2012. The guy became so hot that some fans wanted him to beat CM Punk at Hell in a Cell, but that didn't happen. The mistake WWE made was turning Ryback heel at the height of his popularity. That killed his momentum. His catchy feed me more chants and powerhouse moves were fun to watch, especially when he was fighting more than one jobber at a time. But his career went downhill after he feuded with John Cena. He languished below the main event scene. His position certainly didn't get better when CM Punk went on his infamous tirade about the former star on Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast. By the time Ryback left the company in 2016, it was clear that he was frustrated with his position in WWE. He didn't hesitate to shit on everyone once he left, whether it was Vince McMahon, Triple H, Mark Henry or others. Ryback's constant negativity became a major turnoff. Despite how much he had fallen in his WWE career, Ryback was still a big name that could have drawn around the independent scene, but his never-ending world tour of bashing WWE's likely prevented companies from wanting this guy ever again. Some insiders say that Ryback priced himself out of the business. This could also be true, as he never showed up in bigger companies like TNA and AEW. Truthfully, Ryback was a mediocre wrestler whose flaws were hidden pretty well early in his career. Still, he's one of the bigger better men that WWE pushed in the modern era. There's no denying just how popular he was in 2012, but his constant bitterness over how WWE treated him has killed any chance of him ever going back. Maybe he'll apologize for all the bridges he burnt throughout the years, but the former superstar seems happy about criticizing the very company that made him a big name in the first place. And the Ultimate Warrior. Remember when we said that ego can be a wrestler's biggest downfall? Cue the Warrior. During the peak of the Ultimate Warrior's career, he was a huge star. The Warrior was never a great wrestler, but he had a special character that connected with the fans. Plus, the guy had charisma that matched Hulk Hogan. Beating the immortal Hulk Hogan passed the mantle to the WWE Hall of Famer, but the Warrior's WWE title reign isn't something that people fondly remember. The Warrior just didn't have that magic that Hogan did. His popularity died down when fans realized that he couldn't live up to the standard that Hogan set. Still, the Warrior was a main event star until he pulled an egotistical stunt at SummerSlam 91. The Ultimate Warrior was scheduled to team with Hulk Hogan to face Sergeant Slaughter, Colonel Mustafa, and General Adnan in a handicap match. However, he sent Vince a letter demanding more money, a set schedule, and a higher percentage of merch sales. Allegedly, Warrior asked for $550,000 for WrestleMania 7 and threatened to no-show SummerSlam if Vince didn't give him what he wanted. Vince managed to give in to his demands, but the problem was that this was Vince and Kennedy McMahon. No one outsmarts the boss. Warrior did the match, but Vince suspended him immediately following the SummerSlam main event. He got a second chance after WrestleMania 8 because Hulk Hogan was set to leave. He came back to fill the Hogan void, but Warrior's attitude got worse behind the scenes. He no-showed several live events, and there were claims that he was rude to fans, which is a huge no-no for a babyface. This was also the time that Vince was dealing with the steroid scandal. After Warrior tested positive, Vince opted to fire the former WWE champion. Warrior returned to the company in '96, but his peak had well passed. This was a new era and the former WWE champion just didn't fit in. Vince tried to bring him back into the main event fold, but Warrior's ego was still riding high. He no-showed several events and was terminated from his contract once again. The Ultimate Warrior has surely etched his name in the books of wrestling, but the downfall of one of the hottest stars was another result of a massive ego. But there you have it, folks, WWE wrestlers that self-destructed their own career. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.